Hello, students, and welcome back for another day of math. So, today we're going to be talking about justifying steps in solving equations. So, when we talk about justifying your step, you know how in like language arts, you have to use evidence to back up uh, your idea. You have to cite your sources, all that kind of stuff. That's this is the math equivalent of this. We're basically setting you up to do proofs, which is basically backing up every math statement you do with some kind of proven theory. Okay. For this year, it's going to be pretty simple. We have all the algebraic properties here, and you guys have used them without knowing the names to them already quite a bit. But there's six specific properties that we're going to talk about today that we're going to be using in your justifying steps. So the first one we're going to talk about is kind of the more duh property in all of algebra, which is the symmetric property, which says if one number equals a second number, then the second number equals the first number. And basically all that's saying is if A is equal to B, then that means B is equal to A. It's just flipping the order of the equation is all that it is. It's a very simple property, the symmetric property, basically just saying each side of the equation is equal to each other. Okay, so it's not a very complicated property. That's symmetric. Okay, I'm going to write that so you can see it next to the example when I flip over here too. Sorry, it's kind of small print, so I'm zoomed in here a little bit. The next one, and actually, let's talk about this a little bit too. This isn't one that you're going to necessarily need to know specifically today, but the substitution property basically means that if you know one number is equal to something, then you can substitute that number in for it. So let's say I have like x plus 5 is equal to 7. Okay? And I know that x is equal to 2. Well, if I know that, then I can replace this x here with 2, and it would be the exact same, right? I could say 2 plus 5 equals 7. That's the substitution property. And basically, that's what you do when you want to check your work, right? If you get an answer, you can always plug it back into the variable, and then if it's correct, you should end up with the same number on each side. If I had gotten like x equals 4, and I plugged that in, 4 plus 5, I don't know what I'm writing here, 4 plus 5 equals 7. That would be 9 equals 7. Does 9 equal 7? No. Which means this is untrue, which means my answer is wrong, right? So we use this all the time when we're checking our work anyway. But this is called the substitution property. Now, the other one, distributive property, you guys have done recently, right? Distributive property just basically means if you have a number in front of a parenthesis, you can distribute it, and that number would multiply with both numbers in the parenthesis. Okay, that's the distributive property. And then the main properties we use all the time are the properties of equality. Okay, so remember how we've said when you want to get the variable by itself, you need to, if it's adding, you subtract a number to each side. Well, that would be the subtraction property of equality. If you subtract from one side, you must subtract from the other side in order for it to remain equal. So basically, the addition property of equality is if I add a number to one side, I have to add it to the other side in order for it to remain equal. Subtraction property is I have to subtract it from each side in order for it to remain equal. The multiplication property is if I have to multiply it to each side in order for it to remain equal. And the division property is I have to divide it to each side in order for it to remain equal. And we do that all the time, right? All the time. When I have, for example, let's do this, 4x equals 12, right? If I want to get the x by itself, I'm going to divide 4 from this side to cancel it out, and then I have to divide it from this side as well in order for it to remain equal. That's the division property of equality right there. That's how I solve for x, is using the division property of equality, right? Whenever I do something to both sides, that's using one of those properties of equality, depending on which operation it was. And there's those 4 basic operations. Okay, so again, The four big properties we need to know are the division property equality, multiplication property equality, subtraction property equality, addition property equality, the distributive property, and the symmetric property. Okay, let me show you what we do when we're using these. So let's start by looking at this. So notice we don't actually have to do the math today, right? We are given the math already solved. We are justifying by naming each step or each property they used in each step. Okay, and I'm just going to list them all real quick here. So I have the symmetric property. I have the distributive property. Distributive. And then there's the addition property of equality. I'm only going to write the property of equality once, and then I'll just do the other signs. Property of equality. And let me zoom out here a little bit. Okay. Addition, and then subtraction. Multiplication. And division. Properties of equality. All that stuff. Okay. So those are the 6 properties I am looking at. So let's start by, I'm just going to do one example here, just kind of show you how this works. So I have this problem already solved. It has the original equation, and then they did something with the parentheses to make them go away. Okay. So, actually they didn't do anything. They just combined like terms. So one of the things you're going to see on here is combining like terms is just basic addition. So I'm going to put combine like terms when they combine like terms, but it's not actually property. But we're just going to use combine like terms on there. Okay. Now let's look at the next step. So the next step, they are subtracting 2x from each side. So which property subtracts from each side of the equation? Well, that would be the subtraction property of equality. So I would put subtraction property of equality. Now, I, as a teacher, don't necessarily care if you write out the whole name. If you just write subtraction or sub equality, like that's usually good for me. Ask your teacher though. Maybe they care. But as long as I know what you're talking about, I'm fine. Okay, let's look at another one. So this one, they are subtracting 2 from each side. Well, they're subtracting 2 from each side of the equal sign, which again is the subtraction property of equality. So subtraction equality. Now the next one, they're dividing 2 to each side. Well, which one divides to each side? Well, it's the division. You seen how easy this is, right? You're just basically looking at the operation and writing that down. It is not a hard day, right? Justifying should be pretty simple because really you're just going to be using these 6 different properties and just writing them in. And that's all you got to do today. Okay, and as the last one, 4 equals x equal 4. Which property describes one number being equal to a second number equal? Well, that's the symmetric property, right? Symmetric property. So we would plug in the symmetric property. Now again, all these properties are listed for you with their definitions on page 62 in your book. So you can always look at those. And just to kind of go through just a couple more examples of some things. Let's see if I can find one here. Oh, yeah. So like looking at this one right here, it goes 5 times 3 plus 6 in parentheses becomes 5 times 3 plus 5 times 6. He distributed the 5 to both those terms. What property is that? Well, it is the distributive property. Okay? So if you're distributing into a parenthesis, that is the distributive property. If you're adding to each side, it's the addition property. If you're multiplying to each side, it's the multiplication property. Okay, that's it. That's all you got to worry about today is just writing down those names in the boxes, right? Not too tough. Let me do. Nah, that's probably good. If you have any questions, ask your teacher. We're here to help.